Hey, this is Josh Hewitt. Welcome back to another Straight to the Bar Gym Chat. This is Gym Chat number 272, and we have a guest who's been on the show with us before. I'd like to welcome you back again. Thanks for joining us again here, Kamal Patel. Welcome to the show.
Yep.
Thanks for joining us. And tonight we're going to be talking about how food choices affect your body. And this is a pretty cool topic because, everyone understands basically that nutrition affects your health, your performance, your body composition, but there's a lot of debate on what kind of diet we should be following, what our nutrition should look like. So looking forward to getting in this with you because you've done some research in this area. So let's see what we can find out based on science and research versus hearsay and gym rats. Before we get into that, Kamal, can you give us a little bit of your background and how you got to where you are today?
Sure. I first started reading about nutrition I think freshman or sophomore year of college. Just so happened that the guy who lived next to me in my freshman year dorm was a powerlifter, and not just a regular one. He was a world champ, just totally randomly. So
awesome.
Right away, he told me nutrition yields much more benefit than does micromanaging your reps and your sets at the gym. So started reading more and more. Went to grad school for public health and nutrition. And then ended up at Examine doing syntheses of all the nutrition supplement research that's out there.
Awesome. Cool. Yeah, we've had other guests on the show from examine.com, a website I definitely recommend you check out if you want to find out about supplementation and how it works, its effects, with a very, I think, comprehensive referencing of all of the materials that are out there, and it gives you a good understanding of what the research means when you're looking at supplements. But getting into this topic at hand, then, let's start off by talking about if it fits your macros, because flexible dieting is becoming more and more popular, and I think sort of the science guys are looking at this as the most legitimate or sort of more evidence-based nutrition plan to follow. Basically, if people aren't familiar with flexible dieting, it's tracking your macronutrients and your caloric intake and making sure that you're hitting certain nutrient numbers, certain ratios of protein, fats, and carbohydrates, and meeting your caloric needs. And that trumps the food choices. Like it doesn't matter as much what you're eating as long as you're getting in the certain nutrient ratios, getting in your micronutrition and your fiber as well. What's your opinion on that versus, the other extreme, I guess, would be the clean eaters, which would, to that extreme might argue, oh, calories don't matter as long as you're eating clean or eating, healthy, good food. I've always thought that there's a middle ground there, but with the benefits of, in my opinion, when you track anything, your nutrition, your business goals, your workouts, you get better results if you journal it and you keep track of it and you know what you're putting in your face. But what do you think of that argument that all that really matters is you hit those nutrient ratios and your caloric intake is on track versus, food choices not really mattering?
I think it's a bit of a double-edged sword. So I'm here in San Francisco, which is sort of the hub of the quantified self-tracking movement, and I think it gets annoying a lot of the time. So on the one hand, when I first started lifting weights, after a couple years, I had tried a ketogenic diet and found that during cutting cycles, doing something like Lyle McDonald's Ultimate Diet or some of the earlier versions of that was a very effective way of tracking your calories, loading at certain times, and then taking advantage of some biochemical processes to burn extra fat at certain times. So I would track everything that I ate down to the calorie. It worked out really, really well. That was my first exposure to if it fits your macros, but sort of a more precise earlier version. And then nowadays, everybody's got Fitbits and Jawbone whatevers, and I think those are really great. And we even just got a tweet today from somebody that said, I used Examine and calorie tracking thing to lose 50 pounds. And really, you don't need to Examine for that. You just need to track your calories, and it works. On the other hand, people get so narrowly focused on that they forget even the simplest things can affect your mood and your mood can affect your dieting much more so than any other variables can. So, for example, um, we had a study that we reviewed just a couple months ago about water. It was a randomized trial, or an unrandomized trial looking at people who had high water intakes and low water intakes. They put them in a hospital in a metabolic ward, controlled situation, and had the people with high intakes drink much less water than they usually drink, and then the people with low intakes drink much more than they usually drink. And water was a huge determinant of mood. Now, the study wasn't maybe as high quality as one would want, but it turns out that when something like water can affect your mood so much, and that also affected their food intake, that when you get, for example, a little bit dehydrated because of what you eat, you know, if you're low carb, for example, or if you're not eating very much and you happen to be drinking less or more water because of that, and that's just one example of something that can affect mood. And then if you get in a bad mood, then you're probably more likely to eat sweets and junk food. And that's even like, that's a very basic thing, not even getting into specifics such as the types of amino acids you're eating in your proteins, and the types of carbs you're eating, and different types of foods like nightshades, for example, for some people can have more specific effects. So I think it's very important initially to get a track of what kind of calories you're eating, but after that, food quality is probably much more important in the long run.
Okay, cool. Yeah, you touched on, I mean, a few things with mood, and that's a good example. And nightshades, I think some people have problems with inflammation with nightshade, certain foods like that. But let's get into that a little bit more about how food choices. Then you've sort of touched on how important they can be, just related to your health, overall health. How important can they be? Let's talk about factors such as your digestion, how certain food choices may negatively or positively affect digestion, inflammation in the body. I've heard things as far as having a more alkaline or acid, acidic state in the body as well. I'm not sure how much of a difference that makes, or if that's just related to digestion as well. And then mood you touched on as well. How can different foods positively or negatively affect you in those ways, and thereby affect your health?
So starting with digestion and fruits and vegetables, so the thinking before, let's say 20, 30 years ago in research, was that if you ate a quote-unquote healthy diet with a lot of fruits and vegetables, one of the main reasons that might help your health is because of fiber. And then eventually it turned out that maybe insoluble fiber wasn't like the most healthiest thing in the world. So having insoluble fiber that sort of scrapes your intestines might have certain benefits, but not be as beneficial as other types of fiber, soluble fibers. Now, the thinking nowadays, if you think of possible benefits, there's fiber, there's phytonutrients in fruits and vegetables, there's the whole acid-alkaline bit. So with the acid-alkaline bit, there's not a lot of evidence for that, but it is true that very small changes in pH can affect cellular processes. So if you eat a typical diet, even like a food pyramid diet, it can very easily be quite acidic because grains and meats and dairy are pretty acidic, whereas almost all fruits and vegetables are not very acidic, and people don't get many fruits and vegetables. So that could be a very small factor. Probably a bigger one is how things affect your microbiome. So there's a lot of things that aren't really studied in humans and are more so studied in mice. So if you eat, let's say, a lot of protein, there are certain bacteria in your gut that will thrive on certain types of protein, certain types of amino acids, and they'll even produce certain amino acids. So if you've heard of histamine intolerance, for example, it's something that a lot of people wouldn't ever think about until they have a problem with it. So one day, all of a sudden, you might break out in hives from eating meat. And if you eat a lot of meat, then that sucks. What can you eat? How do you get your protein? One reason could be because there are certain types of bacteria that when they encounter the amino acid histidine from any types of foods, but histidine is fairly high in a lot of meat products, then they turn that into histamine. And the inflammatory process really stems from cells excreting histamine, and that's sort of the first response of the body that produces inflammation. So if you get extra histamine from bacteria in your gut, you're probably going to have some issues with digestion, with your mood, with a lot of different things. And that's just, that usually comes over time from things that you eat. So the ways that you can get histamine are if a food has histamine in it, if a food has a lot of protein that has histidine amino acid that your gut bacteria turn into histamine, or if the enzyme in your gut lining that is supposed to degrade histamine isn't working. And that can happen because your gut lining isn't healthy. So that's only 3 of the many factors that can affect just histamine, just one particular molecule. And that can really affect your gut health in general. And your gut has a lot of your immune system and your neurotransmitter production in it. So this picture gets really, really complicated, and that's why it's hard to ever simplify just one factor. For any particular person, it could be a whole range of different things, and that's why you should never really diagnose over the internet.
No, that's true. Yeah, and it's unique for everyone, and everyone tends to have maybe a different gut profile as far as how their stomach bacteria and their enzymes are. But I have heard that your digestive health has a big effect on your immune system as well. So that's definitely something to consider. What you're putting in your gut. I mean, if you're putting a lot of processed crap in there, or a high refined sugar diet, and it has a negative effect on digestion, then that may negatively affect your immune system as well.
Yep.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, good. Well, I mean that gives us a basic look, or at least something to look into more, to do more research on as far as how your food choices affect your health. And I don't think even people that argue in favor of if it fits your macros, or say you can eat whatever you want as long as you hit these ratios, I don't think they would argue against that. Mostly I've heard that they're just saying, yeah, okay, health, but I'm talking about body composition. You can achieve your body composition goals, low body fat percentage, and still gain muscle tissue by hitting your protein, fat, carbohydrate needs and making sure your calories are where you need them, and still eat, Pop-Tarts and pizza and, a lot of processed junk food, and it doesn't matter as long as you hit those numbers. How would you evaluate that? What feedback would you offer as far as your food choices affecting body composition?
So the first few times that I did structured diets, maybe 15, 20 years ago, like for example the Ronald McDonald's Ultimate Diet, it's a little bit of a reward for bodybuilders to have the refeed period where you can eat, Fruity Pebbles and bagels and your carb loading, and you really do just have to hit your macro limit. So in a sense, if you have control over what you eat, then that is rewarding. But usually people who are trying to lose weight, who aren't trying to get from a 6-pack to a 12-pack, but really just lose 20 or 30 pounds, it's much more important what effect the foods that they eat have on their brain and their gut than if that 50 calories or that 50 grams of carbs fits in your macros. Because, for example, the blood-brain barrier allows certain things in drugs, foods, for example, and certain things it doesn't allow in. Now, the integrity of the blood-brain barrier can be affected by not just things like pharmaceuticals, but also what you eat. So scientists are finding that really the health of any lining in the body, so like the lining of the gut, the lining of the brain, membranes of cells, depends largely on what you eat. One reason is that I think fat is one of the more underappreciated, possibly the most underappreciated macronutrient. So often it's, you get 1 gram per pound of body weight protein, you get this certain amount of carbs, and then everything else is fat, and it's just like go crazy, whatever you want. But protein doesn't build up in your body. Carbs only builds up in the sense that you build up your glycogen. It's fat that really affects you over the long run because it takes 2 to 3 years to turn over the fat in your adipose tissue. So you're really going to be dealing with mistakes you made in the past year or 2, 3, or 4 unless you focus on what types of fat you eat. And anecdotally, I've heard people say, when I eat fried food, I feel terrible. I haven't seen a lot of research on the acute effects of different types of fats, but I have seen a lot of research on the different effects of fats in the next day or 2 or weeks. So fat is the thing that really determines whether you're in an anti-inflammatory or inflammatory state. And it's not just how many omega-3s you get. It's really all the types of fat you eat. Are the fats oxidized? Are you getting too much fat? Is your liver fatty? If your liver is fatty, then probably other things in your body aren't working. So I think probably more attention should be paid to the kinds of fats you eat, even holding protein and carbs constant.
Hmm. Okay. And is that saying as far as paying attention to getting healthy fats in your diet, as well as controlling the type of negative or saturated, deep fried, processed fats you would get?
Yeah, so I'd say first, like even just seeing how you feel eating different fats. So some fats people think of as therapeutic. So coconut oil or fat, MCTs. Sometimes if you let's say you eat a ketogenic diet. If you eat a regular ketogenic diet where it's just extremely low carb versus one where a lot of your fats are in the form of medium chain triglycerides, then you could find yourself feeling a lot better or a lot worse. Some of that could have to do with the effect of those fats on microbes, not just bacteria, but other pathogens, because the types of fats affect the bacteria and fungi and viruses and that type of thing that are in your body. So you could eat a ketogenic diet high in medium chain triglycerides, and all of a sudden it turns out that certain bad species that are in your gut aren't there anymore, and you have more regular bowel movements. So really unexpected things can happen, not just from that, which is fats oriented towards treatment, but also the freshness of the fats you eat. So, fish goes rancid really easily because it has a lot of polyunsaturated fat, but people still buy the bottles of fish oil that are liquid, save them for a long time or get a really big bottle and then end up drinking oxidized fish oil. So there's not a lot of research on that, but it's probably not great for the body. Another tangential thing about fish is fish, sometimes if you feel like you get food poisoning because of seafood, it could be because your seafood is old. I think it's called scombroid poisoning. It's really because of what we talked about before, which is histamine. It turns out that fish gut, their guts also have bacteria, and when the fish is slaughtered, when it dies, if you don't freeze that fish right away on the boat, then the bacteria in the gut of the fish will start breaking down protein in the fish and start making tons of histamine. And then if you eat that fish or seafood product, you could get food poisoning, and it's not because there's crazy species in the fish that cause you to get sick. It's because of histamine. But it's really hard to know about food quality, so that's why, unfortunately, often it's best to go to Whole Foods or some expensive place and really pay attention to your food quality and pay more money, because food quality is probably more important than we think it is.
No, I totally agree. This is probably a whole other chat, and I do have a guest coming on actually in a few weeks to talk about saturated fats and cholesterol and busts and myths on that, because there's back and forth of whether cholesterol in your diet or saturated fat in your diet is actually bad for you, what forms of it, etc. But if we can touch on it quickly, just as a brief, coconut oil in particular, because I've had someone debate with me on that recently, saying, "Oh, all the hype on coconut oil is good for you." No, it's actually saturated fat, and research shows it's bad for you. Kind of, and if I'm generalizing. What research have you done in general, and what can you say with that's more evidence-based related to coconut oil as far as negative, positive, or health benefits?
So the one thing I would say supporting that guy or girl is that a lot of the research for coconut oil, or at least some of it, is in vitro or in animals and doesn't necessarily apply to humans. So if you like put coconut oil in a test tube with something inflammatory and it helps, then that's okay, but doesn't necessarily apply to humans. On the other hand, coconut oil has, I think, never been shown to be harmful to actual outcomes in humans, either intermediate biomarkers, important ones, or in terms of actual heart disease. And when they do ecological studies of whole areas and they link coconut oil to heart disease, like for example, I think in a certain South Indian state, people eat more coconut oil and they also have more heart disease. If you control for the correct confounders, that analysis never holds up. It's always something else. It's either lifestyle, something else that they eat. It's not the coconut oil. Coconut oil, unless maybe your whole diet is coconut oil, it's one of the heart healthiest fats that there is. And it's possibly also antimicrobial. It doesn't really come with with red meats with saturated fats, recently there was a paper that came out about NEU5GC, this sugar molecule only in red meats, not in seafood and white meats, and not in plants. And that could potentially explain some of the inflammatory processes that might be spurred on by red meat, but I think it might be a little bit overblown. So coconut fat has none of that. It doesn't have the dangers of too high levels of polyunsaturated fat. Like you could have too much flax in fish oil, and that's too much polyunsaturated. It doesn't have the dangers of too much mercury from big fish or other animals that are at the top of their food chain, and they could have whatever in their fats. So I think coconut oil is a pretty safe fat to eat, on a daily basis, and it tastes good too. So there's not really too much.
Yeah, no, and I mean you can use it topically, and it's pretty safe that way.
Yeah, exactly.
If there's anything that you're comfortable putting in your mouth, you should, or if you're comfortable putting on your skin, you should be able to comfortable putting in your mouth. I heard something that says that if it goes on your skin, it's going to be absorbed as well. But since I've been
cocoa butter, I don't know if you've ever eaten or used cocoa butter, but I think people use it for moisturizer purposes. But cocoa butter tastes great. And it's a healthy fat, so.
Yeah, no, I agree. And since I've been I use coconut oil to get some NCTs before training. And since I've been using that as a regular part of my diet, I've noticed health benefits as well. And I have chronic sinus issues too. I've even used it, topically in the nose and taken it. And I do think since I've read that it has some antibacterial or antimicrobial properties, I've used it that way as well and noticed a benefit too. Good. I just wanted to get your opinion on that and appreciate that, or at least your research on that.
Actually, one other thing that isn't researched much about coconut oil is, I don't know if you've heard about oil pulling, like swishing.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
So what the natural health people say is, I don't want to call them the natural health people, but what some people say is that you draw out toxins from your body. That's why it's called oil pulling. So obviously that's not true. They say that if you swish the oil around and then you spit it out in 10 or 15 minutes, the reason why it's more whitish is because it drew toxins out. So, that's a load of crap. It's that you aspirated the oil by swishing it around. Now it's got bubbles and other stuff in it. It's not like stuff goes from your liver out there. On the other hand, I talked to a dentist who's a little more out of the box than most dentists, and the two things he recommended were the water pick, like oral irrigators, which if you don't like flossing are awesome and might even be better than flossing for some things. And the second thing is oil pulling is actually not a bad thing because of coconut oil's properties and the fact that it's just a fat in general, more importantly. It can trap a lot of things in your mouth, microbial things that sometimes you couldn't touch, and it can also go between teeth. So some people say they've cured all their cavities and whatever. That's not true. On the other hand, if you have gingivitis or a little excess plaque and you can't get rid of it, then it could be a decent idea to swirl some coconut oil in your mouth, for a couple of weeks and just see what it does. Because the only thing it can do to hurt you is if you breathe it in, snort it up your nose, then you could get a little bit in your lung. And there's been case reports of people getting oil-induced pneumonia from swishing oil in their mouth. But
if you
I think
inhale it,
it's actually not as crazy as it sounds.
So it may not do what they claim, but it might have benefits anyway. Just don't breathe it.
Yeah,
got it.
And I think people have some laying around in big buckets, so might as well use it.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and it's pretty inexpensive, which is another good thing. And it doesn't get messed up when you cook with it either.
Exactly.
Cool. So we're talking about how your food choices can affect your health overall. They were talking about how it can affect body composition. We got into that a little bit. Now, what about performance overall, as far as if you're an athlete or if you just want to improve your strength in the gym? Let's talk about something aside from your mood. But if you're taking the same ratios of protein, fats, and carbs, but your food choices are different, how does that affect what energy you're going to get from those? How your body can use those proteins? How that may affect your strength in the gym, your energy, your performance, your endurance, your metabolism, how quickly you can build muscle and recover, etc.
So I think one sort of epidemic among people who train is if you combine CrossFit with paleo, then I'd say like 15-20% of the time you get somebody eating super low carb and training a lot, which obviously is a recipe for disaster. And it's okay because people often notice that something is up, although sometimes I'll attribute it to adrenal fatigue, which is not true. It's really you're not eating enough carbs. But I think if you take that aside, then one way that what specifically you eat can affect your gym performance is if you eat your supplements. So for some reason, a lot of people haven't tried dietary nitrates, which is one of the only things in your diet that can affect performance right away. So beets or kale, juicing it or eating it half an hour or so, maybe 4 or 5 minutes before you lift weights, is more effective than the crazy NO boosters that are on the market. It's cheaper, it's tastier, it's more healthy. It actually affects your performance. Your performance affects how much muscle you can gain. And I'd say there's no reason not to try it. So nitrates are important. Some people are scared away because nitrates are also used to preserve meats, but it's not really dangerous in normal amounts. And a lot of plants have nitrates, and there's been more research than on almost anything. So I'd say that's one thing that's important to try. And then another thing is, I haven't seen a ton of research on this, but a lot of people eat too much protein. Sort of relating back to what we talked about gut microbiome, how much protein you eat can affect the types of bacteria in your gut, and it's not great to eat too much. Also, when you're eating more than about 200 grams of protein, depending on your weight, you can have too much nitrogenous waste. Too much waste products, I don't know if I've seen research recently, but I recall some sort of decrease in performance if you have too much nitrogenous waste. That study wasn't, however, looking at protein intake, but still, I think there is some connection. So people will eat 300 grams of protein with more than a third of that being from powder, which I think is a huge, huge waste and could possibly decrease performance. And then the last thing is not with macros, but with micronutrients. It's probably more important to make sure that you're getting a decent amount of micronutrients because of what's called triage theory. So this researcher, Bruce Ames, is one of the godfathers of nutrition research, and one of his main theories is triage theory, which is if you kind of slide by with minimal levels of nutrients, like you get just enough vitamin C, A, D, whatever, then it's not like you're going to get scurvy, you're not going to get beriberi or whatever, but your body knows what level of nutrients are floating around, and if after a certain amount of time you don't have, above a median level of nutrients, then functions such as muscle building or immune system enhancement, those will be secondary survival. So people don't think about it, but it's important to get the right amount of micronutrients, not just for health, but for training. And it's probably more important for training because you won't notice for health until 10 or 20 years down the road, most likely, but you'll notice within a month or two for training. So you don't have to get those packs of 5 to 10 to 20 pills. You just have to get the nutrients that are probably missing in modern diets, like vitamin D and magnesium and that kind of thing.
Yeah. Okay. And still supplementing, I guess if you can get it from actual food sources, that is the best option. Yeah, cool. All right, cool. So I mean, that talks. I wanted to just we talked about body composition a bit. I want to just talk a little bit more about, like, for fat loss. Is there any evidence that eating certain foods can assist with your metabolism or help your body to metabolize fat more efficiently?
Yeah. So on the food side of things, as opposed to the drink side, the more of certain fibrous foods you eat, the more the gut excretes these hormones, which indicate satiety, which is important for fat burning. So a lot of what goes on hormonally in your body stems from your gut, and if you eat certain things like artichokes and other fibrous vegetables, then that actually has a similar impact on the hormones released by your stomach as if you had a stomach stapling or something like that, because it really does indicate satiety. And you can duplicate that with supplements, but you might as well do it through food because you have to eat healthy foods anyway. On the drink side of things, surprisingly, some people don't drink enough water, and water is an important thing for satiety. But for other drinks, really, it's green tea and coffee. You know, typically caffeine, including things that affect fat burn. And for coffee, it's basically just caffeine. But for green tea, it's a bunch of other things like EGCG. And there's been meta-analyses on green tea almost every year for the past few years, and it's basically one of the only food or drinks that has a reliable effect. So might as well use green tea as a supplement or drink form if you want to lose fat.
Yeah, cool. Yeah, and I also supplement with EGCG as a supplement form, as an extract, but definitely drinking tons of green tea. Before workouts, though, I do like to have, I notice a bigger difference if I have a strong black coffee or take like a caffeine anhydrous like as a supplement form. I notice more of the caffeine effect from that than I do from green tea, but yeah, both staples of my diet. I don't actually use now caffeine as like just to wake up in the morning. I try and use it only for performance, like for working out specifically. And other than that, it's the green tea. But no, those are great suggestions, and I was curious about the green tea because I hear back and forth that it's not going to make much difference or it's just the caffeine in it, but there are other ingredients in there that can help your body with metabolizing fat or support a healthy metabolism.
And also, I actually randomly ran across a guy who produces green tea at a restaurant downtown here, and a lot of his job was marketing green tea as food that has L-theanine in it, so to counteract caffeine, to relax yourself. And it's important for people like me because the first thing I noticed when I got a 23andMe gene profile a few years ago is I'm a slow caffeine metabolizer, and I always sort of suspected that because if I have caffeine anytime except for first thing in the morning, then it keeps me up at night, and I thought there was no way that can happen, but my gene type is so that I probably shouldn't drink too much caffeine. So if I supplement with caffeine, anhydrous, and L-theanine, then it almost fully cancels out the nighttime effect on my sleep. So good to know.
And that's already naturally occurring in green tea.
Yeah, exactly. So I could just sip that.
Awesome. Cool. That's a lot of information. I think. Is there anything else that you wanted to touch on, cover on this topic? I think we covered quite a bit.
No, I think sounds good.
Yeah, that's good. So that gives us an idea. So I think that, overall, you didn't dismiss the importance of tracking your nutrient intake. Being aware of how much protein, fats, and carbs you take in. You wouldn't disregard the benefit of knowing how many calories that you're consuming, but definitely to dismiss the quality of the food that you're taking in would be a mistake. I think we made that pretty clear here. If your goal is to maintain or good health or improve your health, if your goal is to improve your performance, or if your goal is to change or improve body composition, definitely your food choices can make a difference, and we touched on some great points in here. If people wanted to find out a little bit more about this topic, is there a resource you can recommend, or is there some way they can get a hold of you to find out more?
Sure. So we actually write about this topic pretty regularly on examine.com, and one of the most helpful things is our research digest, which comes out once a month, the first week of the month, covers 8 of the most important recent articles on nutrition and supplementation in the peer-reviewed press. So relating to if it fits your macros, from our last issue, we covered this really cool study, which was a randomized trial of rapid versus slow dieting. So these researchers took a group that dieted down within like 12 weeks and lost a bunch of weight versus something like 30 weeks or even more. And then they looked at another period after that to see, in the 2 or 3 years after that dieting period, which group kept the weight off. Turns out neither group kept the weight off, which often happens, but the rapid weight loss group didn't do any worse. And in fact, in the weight loss period in the beginning, more of the rapid weight loss group achieved their weight loss goal than the slow weight loss group. So the common wisdom from, like the doctors, grandparents, whatever, is don't lose too much weight too quickly. Slow and steady.
Slow reverse dieting, yeah.
It's probably not true, and one of the reasons it's not true is at least the one time I worked in a clinical setting with people who were morbidly obese, our official guidelines were to lose the weight slow and steady, but when I would talk to them one-on-one, usually what I get is, I want to see the scale change. And I'd say if you can eat healthy and lose weight quickly, then it's been shown to work in the data. So protein-sparing modified fast, PSMFs, work. Now, you usually almost always should do those with medical supervision, but if you can eat like, 30, 40% calorie decrement and base it on whole foods, then you're probably more likely to keep it off and you're more likely to achieve your goals. So I'd say, if it fits your macros and if you can eat healthy, then do it and track it meticulously, and it's probably going to work okay.
Awesome. Yeah, good feedback. I think that's a great summary that will sort of answer most people's questions when they're watching this, because a lot of people not only want to improve performance and stay healthy, but they want to make changes in body comp. Great, and also, I mean, maybe not easy for everyone to follow, but simple advice to follow. Awesome. If people want to get a hold of you, find out more, if they have any questions for you in particular, what's the best way to reach you?
So contact me on examine.com. I'm on the contact form there, and send us emails about anything you're interested in, any questions you have, something you want us to cover. We only look at the peer-reviewed objective evidence, and if you see a trial that you want to know about, let us know, in case we don't know about it, and we'll try to cover it. And if you're interested in reading the nitty-gritty about the research or keeping up to date, check out our examine.com research guide, and we have 10 to 15 people look over each and every issue, so we make sure we cover everything from every angle. Any one person can only know about certain topics, so we try to know our limits, and just check out our website and send us any questions you have.
Awesome. Okay, so that makes it pretty easy. Just everyone check out examine.com. You'll see the guide there you can download. You can find the contact form. You can send him a direct message. Everything should be there on the site. It's pretty easy to navigate, I guess, to find out what they're after, right?
Yep.
Awesome. Thanks a lot for joining us again. This has been great and a lot of information. I'm going to go through this video myself after. I appreciate it. Love to have you back on the show soon.
Yep, me too.
Awesome. All right. Thanks again. And thanks for everyone watching. We will have another gym chat coming up next week, so make sure you join us then. And until then, stay strong.